Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. We're going to call the April 12th MWPA Ops Committee meeting to order. We'll move over to the roll call. So Martina, can you do a roll call of the board, please?
Certainly, sir. Can everybody give me a thumbs up just to let me know you hear me okay? Perfect. Starting with the town of Fairfax for Heather Abrams.
Present.
For Kentfield Fire District, Chief Pomey.
Present.
And for Marinwood, I believe Eric Drakeson let me know that he would not
I'm
be.
here.
Oh, I'm so sorry. He's right in front of me. Eric Drakeson. Present. For the town of Corte Madera, Adam Wolf. For Novato Fire, Bill Tyler.
Here.
For Southern Marin Fire, Chris Tubbs.
Here.
For Bolinas Fire District, George Krakauer.
Here.
For Marin County Fire, Chief Weber.
Good morning. Here.
For the city of Larkspur, Dan Schwartz.
Here.
For the city of San Rafael, Darren White.
Here.
For the town of Ross, Krista Johnson.
Here.
For Inverness Public Utilities District, Jim Fox.
Here.
For Muir Beach Community Services District, Chris Gove.
Here.
For the city of Mill Valley, Todd Cusimano.
Here.
For the town of San Anselmo, Dave Donnery. Looks like Dave might not be here with us, and I don't see him in the attendee side. For Sleepy Hollow, Dan Mahoney.
Here.
And for, for Stinson Beach Fire, Jesse Perry.
Here.
And it looks like we've definitely have a quorum, sir.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 3, agenda adjustments. Any requests for adjustments to the agenda? Moving forward to number 4, public comments. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda. Martina, are there any members of the public?
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, the open time for public expression, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. And sir, we do not have any public comments.
Also moving on to number 5, the planning and program managers report from Anne.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll be sharing my screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this slide. Great. I will keep this short since we have plenty to discuss today. But I did want to provide a few updates. We have been working on a list of qualified contractors to help with vegetation management projects. And the idea here is to help streamline the contracting process to get work started and done on the ground. We went through a process of soliciting input from various contractors who submitted answers to a questionnaire regarding insurance, any pending litigation, things like that, to make sure they were qualified to be on our shortlist. So we now have a shortlist ready to be used by our member agencies, especially for core projects. And that includes over 25. Sorry, we're going to fix that sound issue. Okay. We have over 25 contractors on the list right now, and we plan on keeping that up to date by receiving additional requests to be on the list about on a quarterly basis. We are also working to bring on a GIS contractor to help us build a GIS program. As you know, a lot of the data that we're collecting and a lot of the planning that we do involves spatial data. So we are bringing on a contractor to help us build a program to make sure that all of the different efforts related to GIS and spatial data, metrics, planning for projects, implementing projects in the field, all of that is integrated. So we went through put out an RFP, received a lot of great responses, went through an initial scoring of those proposals. and some interviews with our top candidates. And we're working right now to make some final selections and discuss potential contracts. So we're really excited to get that underway. I'd expect to see that on the MWPA board agenda in May. And we have a field trip coming up. April 26th, this field trip has been rescheduled a couple of times now due to rain. It's been quite a winter, and so we've put a lot of our field trips on hold due to weather. We are hopeful that we'll be doing a field trip 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on April 26th. This will be hosted by the MWPA, Marin County Fire ESP partnership. We're also hoping that the Housing Authority will help host this because it directly benefits some lower income housing in the Marin City area. So we'll be talking about this project, April 26th. It'll be a kind of ADA compliant friendly field trip. So if you're not up for a hike, this is a great one to attend. We'll be spending most of the time on a paved, easily accessible area talking about the project. And then, you know, a few of us can go for a hike a little later in the field trip if that suits us. So we invite all to join us for this field trip. And that's it for me. Happy to take questions.
Any questions for Ann? Let's open the floor to public comment.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, the planning and program managers report, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. And so there are no comments.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, consent calendar. We'll open the floor to public comment for the consent calendar.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the consent calendar item, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining us by phone. And so there are no comments.
Any requests for edits from the committee for the previous agenda? I think we have a motion to approve the previous minutes.
Motion to approve. Second.
So it's a first from Eric, second from Chief Tubbs. Martina, can you pull the board, please?
Certainly, sir. And that was a motion by Eric Drakeson, seconded by Chief Tubbs to go ahead and approve the minutes as presented, starting with Heather Abrams.
Aye.
Mark Pomey,
Yes. Yes.
Eric Drakeson,
Yes.
Adam Wolf,
Yes.
Bill Tyler,
Yes.
Chris Tubbs,
Yes.
George Krakauer,
Yes.
Jason Weber,
Yes.
Darren Schwartz,
Yes.
Darren White,
Yes.
Krista Johnson,
Yes.
Jim Fox,
Hi.
Chris Gove,
Yes.
Todd Cosumano,
Yes.
Dan Mahoney,
Yes.
Dave Donnery. Does not look like Dave is with us as of yet, and Jesse Perry.
Yes.
And so I do believe we can take the minutes all in favor or not. So I don't believe I need to run through the list of names
Sounds
since
good.
we have everyone here.
We'll change that for next time. Nice. Moving on to 7A, fiscal year 2023 work plan and draft proposal.
Great, thank you so much. So today we're going to spend some time talking about proposals that have been submitted thus far for the next fiscal year work plan and budget. We are going to walk through them, kind of look at the where we are in terms of milestones and process. We're going to provide a quick update on JPA-wide proposals that we discussed previously. We're going to go through each of the zones and talk about the zone-specific proposals that have been submitted. And then we're going to need to take a few minutes to talk about how to use that kind of priority funding that we've discussed previously that has been set aside, especially to think kind of strategically about where, you know, what projects and what zones might need a little extra funding for the next fiscal year. Right now, we don't have to make any big decisions during this meeting. we can have a discussion and save final decisions for our May 3rd meeting. We also have operations ad hoc subcommittee meetings coming up to dive into the details a little further. The ATC is still meeting. There's one more meeting for the full ATC, and the ad hoc subcommittee for the ATC continues to meet and would like to continue to provide input to the operations committee. So here we are in terms of process. You've seen this slide before. It's slightly modified to include some additional meetings for the ATC. So we've been working since November, December on this task. We've been submitting proposals into the portal. Thank you for everyone who's been working on that. That mostly occurred in February and March, and those proposals continue to be tweaked, modified. The numbers change a little bit. The wording changes a little bit, but mostly, I think at this point, all the proposals are in the portal now and are available publicly online to anybody who wishes to view them. The month of April is really about finalizing these proposals and the numbers. So the numbers that you'll see in the spreadsheets today in these slides are draft. They can change. They will change according to what the JPA-wide budget is, et cetera. We'll go into the math a little bit later. So ATC will meet again on the 18th. The ad hoc subcommittee will continue to meet. The operations ad hoc subcommittee will continue to meet. And then we have another meeting May 3rd, and that's really kind of pencils down. Let's take a vote to move this on to the MWPA board so that the board can consider the work plan and budget in May at the May 18th meeting. So getting into the numbers here, we're assuming a 3% increase due to the CPI for this next fiscal year. So that puts us in terms of Measure C revenue around 21 million for the next fiscal year. Now the math here is 20% of that goes to local projects. Another 20% of that goes to D-Space. We can talk a little bit about the 2% direct abatement cost that gets kind of earmarked out of D-Space. There were some discussions at the ad hoc subcommittee level about that. Then 20% of the overall, or sorry, 60% of the overall budget gets pulled out. 10% of that is subtracted for admin. And then we have, and then JPA-wide budget is subtracted for that. And then we're taking that number and using that to set our core budgets for each of the zones. So the math is a little bit complicated here, but basically we're setting our target budgets for core projects at 80% of that available core funding for each zone, and then taking that 20% and thinking a bit more strategically, that's that 20% priority funding that we discussed before, and that's around 1.3 million. JPA-wide budget is right now 4.72 million for the proposals that we've discussed previously. That's just slightly lower than numbers you've seen previously. We've been trying to shave a little bit off that budget. So just to review, these are the proposals that you've seen previously for JPA-wide projects. These should all seem fairly familiar. One change is that the on-parcel and fuel break risk assessment work will include an assessment of not only the kind of D-Space and home hardening actions that residents have taken as a result of the inspections and the grant program, et cetera, but we'll also dig into our stated fuel breaks and look at the effectiveness and calculate the before and after risk and therefore that benefit that they provide. A few other items, I separated out the vegetation management specialist positions into a separate line item rather than having it be bundled with the environmental compliance item. And we've removed the funding component of the UCCE Marin Master Gardener's position. We'll continue to support that, but the line item is no longer part of the budget. And that was as a result of the operations ad hoc subcommittee discussions that took place. I've also added a GIS program line item here. Yes, somebody had a question.
On the I lost track of it there, but the thing you just discussed with the master gardeners,
Mhm.
it's no longer in the budget, but we're still supporting it. Does that mean we're not budgeting for it, but we still support any interaction with that organization? And
Yeah, we'll still continue to coordinate with UCCE and Maroon Master Gardeners and coordinate with that with the person who's in that position currently. But the fiscal year 23-24 budget will not include additional budget for that position.
thank you.
And Mark, feel free to chime in if there's anything else you'd like to say about that, but hopefully that covers it.
It does.
Great. Okay. So other than that, there should not be much that is a surprise here. The ATC ad hoc subcommittee includes Fred Hilliard, Lynn Osgood, Quinn Gardner, Todd Lando, Lauren Umbertus, and has met 3 times and will meet again in April to dive into project proposals and really think through that 20% and provide additional input to the operations committee on that priority funding. The operations ad hoc subcommittee includes Jesse Perry, Adam Wolf, Bill Tyler, Dan Schwartz, Mark Pomey, Eric Dickerson, and Todd Cusimano. We have 2 more meetings coming up in April. We've been working on a doodle poll and trying to accommodate as many schedules as we possibly can. So asking for forgiveness for anyone who isn't able to attend both. We'll do our best to accommodate schedules. Discussion topics thus far for the operations committee ad hoc subcommittee include some of the following, and please feel free to pipe in for those of you attending those meetings and help me cover those topics. But a discussion around the direct abatement set aside that I mentioned previously that comes out of the defensible space budget. That's kind of, it was an option written into the JPA language and hasn't been used yet and is just kind of sitting there. And so the ad hoc subcommittee discussed the possibility of not necessarily eliminating it, but capping it where it is now and then using it if it's needed, but not contributing further to that until it's needed. Also discussed that peer-to-peer proposal for additional public outreach and partnering that with Fire Safe Marin for the sake of efficiency and making sure that's integrated into Fire Safe Marin's work. Also discussed, as I mentioned, the UCCE position and removing that line item from the budget. And then budget for the county disaster coordinator position and that kind of ratio of MWPA contribution versus county and other entities. Is there anything I missed or anything that anyone would like to add to those talking points about the operations ad hoc subcommittee? No? Okay. So moving on to the proposals for this next fiscal year, the trends that we're seeing for this next fiscal year were really what we predicted, which is in the first couple of years, we proposed a lot of new projects, a lot of new shaded fuel breaks, new programs. And then as we kind of mature as an entity, as an organization and a collaborative, we start moving into more maintenance and continued implementation of some of those projects and programs. So we saw that definitely this year in terms of the proposals that came in for 23-24. So a lot of the proposals that you'll see today listed in the following tables will be repeats of proposals you've seen in previous years. So in terms of how we're going to cover it today, we'll go through zone by zone, just at a very high level, what was proposed for each of the zones. And I'm going to ask for folks from each of the zones to help me out with that presentation, and anybody who's not available, I'll cover it for them. Another budget consideration is unspent funds from the last couple of fiscal years, so fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23. If you have unspent funds, you might want to consider that in your ongoing budgeting. For us, we're requesting that member agencies continue to submit receipts, invoices for reimbursement for core projects, especially so we can have a more precise count of what our rollover is going to be for each of these projects. We have a lot of question marks still in our spreadsheet, so we're going to ask that you work with your staff to help us figure out what those numbers are looking like. So without further ado, I'd like to dive into each of the zones. This is the Central Marin Zone, and I'm not sure if Todd Lando or others are available to discuss this. If not, I'm happy to discuss. Martina, do you mind looking out in the participants to see if anybody has their hand raised or if anybody in the room would like to cover this? If not, I'm happy to do it.
And we do have Larry coming over in just a second.
Great.
And I believe Larry Passero has joined the attendees list or the panelist list.
All right. Quickly, I can go over the Central Marin Zone local ND space projects. With continued effort, our agencies have synchronized our projects to make sure that we are kind of in sync with what our zone is trying to accomplish throughout. So you'll notice that all agencies are including an invasive vegetation treatment program, a defensible space voluntary abatement program, and then support of our defensible space and inspection and evaluation program. This has been consistently what we've done for the last few years with the intent of maintaining those projects, but also providing maintenance to those projects and continuing to build on the success of each one of those individual projects within our local jurisdictions and throughout our zone. Any question for the central zone? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Larry. And I'll just add that in terms of core projects, the central zone includes further implementation of the evacuation route work. That's the roadside vegetation management, a bit trimmed back this year because I think a lot of the highest priority areas have been treated in one way or another in the last couple of years. The Greater Ross Valley shaded fuel break is another item that will continue to be an ongoing budget item in the Central Marin Zone, and the Defensible Space and Home Hardening Evaluation and Inspection Program is seeking some funding, $300,000, and that is an item for discussion in terms of the priority funding that we mentioned before. So that's why that cell is highlighted a slightly different color to remind us to think about that when we're having that discussion later. Larry, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Now moving on to West Marin, wondering if Bolinas would like to speak to this.
Yeah, I'll speak to this. My camera's glitching here, but I'll try it. Thanks, Ann. Yeah, so for Bolinas D-Space, we will be using the county D-Space inspection program to canvass about half of Bolinas with the initial inspections. As far as local, we are, I'm sure Ann, you'll speak to the core project for the West. But for local, we're going to elect to basically roll over those funds for a future vegetation mitigation project out here in the coast. But that's dependent on a core project that Ann will discuss later. Any questions for Bolinas? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Moving on to Inverness, I'm wondering if Inverness, Jim, or others would like to speak to this item.
Sure, I can speak to that. They're just the continuation of the projects from last year. Same as Bolinas, we'll be using Marin County for the D-Space inspections. We'll be using vendors for the evacuation route management, and we'll just continue. We're continuing on the equipment purchase, and given the rising costs of things, it may just continue into next year too. But we'll those are just continuations, basically.
Great, thank you so much. Stinson Beach, Jesse, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, we're going to be putting aside some money for emergency evacuation and alerting, no weather radios, continuing with additional chipper days on top of Fire Safe Marin chipper days. We'll have some money set aside for maintenance to our fuel break that we worked on this year, and budgeting the majority of our defensible space for defensible space. Any questions?
Great, thank you so much. Looking at Marin County Fire, I'm not sure if Jordan is available to speak to this or Chief Weber, otherwise I can go through it.
If Jordan's not popping up, I'll step up. But I mean, what you've got here is vegetation treatment in both the county service areas, which surround Santa Fe, as well as county service area in the west. Probably better described as just unincorporated areas not in fire districts. And then Rancho Santa Margarita is a roadside vegetation project. The Nicasio San Geronimo evacuation route piece includes just, again, those geographical areas. And then the D-Space program, we're still in a united program with the other Central Marin agencies that was mentioned already. And a report.
Great, thank you so much. Going into core proposals, I'm going to mention the project at the bottom here, and then I'll ask Chief Weber if you would like to add anything regarding the county fire core proposals. Otherwise, I'm happy to go through them for you if you'd like. The fourth item on the list here is a coastal zone defensible space shaded fuel break project. And this is phase 1. And this is really a reflection of the added kind of regulatory burden of being in the coastal zone. So the additional requirements related to the Coastal Act, the sensitivity of resources in the coastal zone really impacts Inverness, Stinson Beach, Muir Beach in the southern zone, Bolinas. And what we talked about was doing kind of a scoping process, working with each of these agencies to determine what their priorities are, what is the wish list that we'd like to see happen in the next several years, and then go through the environmental compliance process for those items, both in terms of CEQA and also in terms of Coastal Act compliance with the state. The idea here is to get ourselves set up for future implementation and work with our partners to make sure that all of those wish list items are covered so that we're not doing this multiple times, but we're doing this at least in terms of CEQA compliance once, and then we'll need to do Coastal Act permitting as needed under the Public Works Plan that's currently in process. So the reason why this cell is highlighted is because it's one of the contenders for that additional 20% priority funding that we talked about previously. Chief Weber, do you want to talk about the other ones?
I think you're being awfully kind with the challenges in the coastal zone. Maybe too PC, you know, it's become so laborious to work out there on top of, you know, CEQA compliance. We're having to go through this thing. So I mean, I think on a statewide level, we're looking at this, you know, and possibly trying to legislate a way to something that, you know, when you look at evacuation routes and other things that really aren't changing the aesthetics of the coast, but have high impact and return on safe evacuations and defensible space, shouldn't be this laborious. And then I think the other items are just as described on there. There's continued evacuation work going on. You know, quite a few projects that are not funded through MWPA, but grant funded in the San Geronimo or other places through CAL FIRE grants. And then some equipment, as we've been fortunate enough to be able to have a heavy equipment operator that can dedicate time towards vegetation management projects. And a report.
Great, thank you so much. You know, the National Park Service item, the project support item listed here brings up that interesting point where the environmental compliance under the federal standards, NEPA, is complete and Coastal Act compliance is complete for work on federal lands. So some work can take place on federal lands in the coastal zone. And so that's reflected here in that $50,000 item and could be a part of the Bolinas proposal as well, doing some work on federal lands in areas that are a high priority in partnership with National Park Service staff. So that's ongoing as well. But yes, a significant regulatory burden in the coastal zone. Now we're going to move to Novato, and I guess I should ask if there are any questions regarding the West Marin that you'd like to ask me or Chief Weber before we move on. Okay. I'd like to invite Novato to speak to these items. I believe we have a Novato staff member, Sarah Laberton, who could speak to this item. If you can raise your hand if you're in the audience, that'd be great. And Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. We have local and D-Space in this table, and then the next table is core projects.
Hello. Yeah, so I'm working with Mike Swayze on all of these projects for Novato Zone. Our local funds are invested almost completely in the grant programs for home hardening and vegetation management, with a portion saved for the voluntary abatement or invasive vegetation program, which is successfully used for hardship cases in the area. Our defensible space funds will continue to invest in the wildfire mitigation specialist staff position. We are also proposing a new staff position for the Novato Fire Mitigation Rangers, modeled after the San Rafael positions. We've developed an MOU with Novato Police Department to fund a full-time and half-time position. The Rangers will monitor for wildfire hazards in the open space in and around the Novato community and mitigate those hazards immediately when identified. The Rangers will also assist in addressing wildlife concerns associated with encampments in the open space. And that's our local and D-Space funding. Our core funds will be invested in a variety of projects throughout the Novato community, many of which are carried over from the 22-23 work plan for continued implementation and maintenance. A large portion of the core funds will be allocated for the Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break. Most of the work will begin after the nesting bird season. We'll finish up the botanical and cultural surveys this spring and early summer. We will be completing a Fire Smart demo garden project at Station 63 this spring, and we want to do a similar project next fiscal year at the Novato Fire Admin Building. We will continue maintaining vegetation around the Marin Valley neighborhood with the goat grazing project proposal. We will also continue maintaining all of City of Novato open space and HOA owned open space. The Novato Fire Road Maintenance Project is a new proposal. We had a similarly named pilot project this current fiscal year where we're doing an inventory of all unpaved wildland roads. This new proposal will be looking at project work that came out of that inventory. We will continue to maintain the past fuel breaks and evacuation route projects in Marin Highland and Ignacio Valley, Black Point and Green Point, and the larger Novato evacuation route projects. We also have 3 staff positions funded by core dollars. They're all on there. We have the Vegetation Management Program Manager, a Senior Vegetation Management Specialist, and an entry-level Vegetation Management Specialist. And that's the end of my presentation. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Any questions immediately, or should we move on to the next zone and circle back? Okay, thank you, Sarah. Now let's talk about San Rafael proposals, and I'm wondering who is available to speak to that. Chief White, are you available? Thank you.
I can speak with it. I'll be honest, I'm not as well versed on this as maybe some of the vegetation management staff, but I'm happy to identify some of those areas where I see changes. And also, before I get started, I just want to also add, I do have a question where I want to see whether or not there's some zone-wide funding that could be contributed to a project in Marinwood as part of the evacuation risk assessment ingress egress study that's taking place, as to whether or not there's some work that can be done on a median that doesn't appear to be Marinwood specific property. So I think maybe a sidebar conversation on that after this is all said and done, if we have time. But yes, looking at our local, it appears we have landscape restoration. We're trying to contribute funding towards improving some of those areas that have already been treated with stump grinders and other areas that had vegetation removed, and now try to restore it with fire resistive landscaping and other aesthetically appealing species to kind of restore the environment there and make sure it's visually appealing. Our police rangers, that program continues on with success, and our parking box program is expanding to continue to ensure that we're addressing those areas within the hillsides and narrow roads that we deem to be receiving the value of the parking box program. We've had to revamp 1 or 2 areas based on concerns spoken by some of the neighbors in those areas, but I think overall we're getting a lot of support for the effort there. And that includes the signage and other things that are taking place. Moving forward down to evacuation drills, I think they're long overdue. I see that amount of 5,000. I don't know if that's really going to be sufficient, but maybe that's a good start as we partner with Elaine Wilkinson, trying to at least target certain neighborhoods on either tabletop and or eventual actual evacuation exercises and drills in certain neighborhoods. Educational landscaping, that continues, and we're looking to hopefully continue to fill that out and have a very prime example of what fire safe landscaping will look like for community members to come by and see that gardening in that area to reference for ideas and appropriate species that can be utilized in their immediate surroundings. Public education outreach and engagement, we want to continue our efforts there, obviously, for obvious reasons. Ember Stomp and other locations are going to be prime opportunities for us to get out and perhaps staff a booth and be available to share information with the public. The city wildfire playbook, we just finished a storm playbook. We want to move towards now wildfire playbook as our next targeted objective there. And I think that's going to be very useful for us, both in Emergency Operations Center and just as a whole when we start to plan and understand what exactly we want to do. And for the D-Space program, ongoing and continuous efforts to ensure that we're doing everything we can with the resources as appropriately and judiciously as we can. So looks like we also have some projects in Marinwood regarding the open space and our fire road vegetation management. I can only imagine right now with the rains and the additional growth that may come and result from those rains, we're certainly going to look to ensure that we're maintaining those roads and expanding our efforts in that area as well.
Great, thank you so much. In this slide, we also have highlighted the Ridgewood budget, and that's because Santa Fe Fire is looking for some additional 20% funding to help with that budget. That's going to be a large cost in terms of implementation, a lot of eucalyptus removal. And in this next slide, this summarizes the Marinwood defensible space and local proposals that are continuing on from last year. Thank you, Chief White.
Thank you.
So unless we want to dig into any questions around Santa Fe zone proposals, we can move on to Southern Marin proposals, if that's okay with everyone here. Great. Do we want, Chief Tubbs, do we want Fred Hilliard to propose to discuss these? Okay, great. Fred, I think you are a participant, so we'll move you over as a panelist.
He should be joining us just momentarily.
Great. Welcome, Fred. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So Southern Marin proposals with regards to Mill Valley, we're going to continue with these are continuations for the most part. The hazardous tree removal, which is actually forest health and restoration. We retitled that, it just didn't get into this particular slide. That is ongoing. We've joined with the central part of the county, Marin County Fire, the Defensible Space Inspection and Evaluation Program. So we've put some local or some defensible space money towards that. And this is an ongoing position that we are currently funding and will continue to fund through the next fiscal year.
We want to invite Mirror Beach to talk about these three items? Chris Gove, or would you like me to talk?
Yeah,
about
sorry, I was just unmuting. As you can see, we got limited funds and we're continuing to remove hazardous trees, and we're putting together some money to get a flail mower for our tractor to kind of maintain the stuff that we've done. And of course, we're using the county to do our inspections. And I think that's about it.
Great, thank you so much. And Fred, I've changed the name of that proposal everywhere except this slide, so apologies.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to Southern Marin Fire Local and D-Space.
Okay, so again, the Southern Marin Forest Health Restoration Maintenance Project is ongoing. We also have a vegetation management specialist we're going to fund with our rollover funds from 22-23. That's a local project. The Sausalito Forest Health is a rollover project from the previous year. And then the Deputy Fire Marshal is a new position. This position is a shared cost between the district and MWPA. This person will be running and overseeing all vegetation management for MWPA and our local projects as well. The D-Space Inspector full-time is an ongoing position. Again, the Southern Marin District or Southern Marin Fire is engaged with the Defensible Space Inspection and Evaluation Program. And so funding will be coming out of our local, actually our D-Space funding for that. And then the Southern Marin Emergency Notification Network, that's our LRAD. That is actually, we're going to be using rollover funding from our defensible space, or sorry, from our D-Space for this next fiscal year.
Thank you so much. A few more.
Yep. So speaking on behalf of the core projects, and I'd just like to point out to the chiefs that in the southern area, prior to doing all these projects, we had a joint meeting with Marin County Fire as well as Muir Beach Fire to discuss, priority projects and where funding should go. And so a lot of these projects we've either in the southern area, Southern Marin, have scaled down a little bit to provide funding for say the Muir Beach projects where the priorities, there might be a higher priority. With that being said, the Mill Valley Shaded Fuel Break is a continuation. Tamalpais Homestead Valley Fuel Break is another continuation. The Neighborhood Regional Response Coordinator is a shared cost position. And that is not just neighborhood response, but it's also public education. The Mill Valley Summit and Ralston Fuel Break is a continuation project. And then I won't speak on behalf of the Muir Beach section, but the Ring Mountain Fuel Break again is another continuation.
Thank you so much. Chief Gove, would you like to speak to Muir Beach? I'm happy to do it if you prefer not to.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, so we're seeking some funds to continue the Banducci project that we started last year, and we've been accruing funds. As you can see, it's quite a bit of money that we've spent and want to continue to spend. And then the other project that we're proposing is the uphill side of Highway 1, which is a combination of right of way for Highway 1 and also private homeowners. And we got some good feedback on people that we proposed this to, so we're looking forward to doing it.
Great, thank you. And that would be covered under the larger environmental compliance effort for the coastal zone. And this funding would contribute to that effort. So there are a couple of county fire proposals in here. Happy to mention them. Our Chief Weber is happy to, I'm happy to let you speak to these. That includes the warning signs and also continuation of the Marin City fuel reduction project.
I think you've covered it.
Okay, great. I believe that the warning signs, this proposal really came from the County Board of Supervisors, if I'm correct. And the Marin City item is highlighted here because Jordan Research suggested considering this as a potential priority funding proposal.
So yeah, as background on the signs, a lot of West Marin is visitors that may not be registered our alert and warning system. And what we're trying to do is at access points into West Marin, similar to what we have like on 101, but signboards that can, give messaging regarding, an active fire or an evacuation. A lot of, especially geographically spread out so far, the siren systems, LRAD or others, obviously can't reach hundreds of miles. So that's the intent. And we're working on funding, internally other signs in other areas.
Great, thank you. So in terms of.
Can I just ask a quick question, Ann,
Please.
for
Yeah.
Fred? I'm just curious. And Fred, maybe I missed it, but and Jason mentioned LRAD. Are you guys setting aside money for that? Are you expanding it, or are you guys complete with that project? Just curious.
So the money that we're setting aside is rollover funding. But the project, we still have several sites that are proposed. I believe there's 3 additional sites that we're looking to fund. And then that would complete our warning system for the southern area until such time that we identify an area that may need additional, an additional site. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, so that's your notification rollover. That's what that item, or is there a different?
No, that's the rollover fund. So we had rollover funding for a project that did not happen. And so actually for a position that did not happen, 2 positions that did not happen for the fiscal year 22-23. So we're rolling that rollover funding and using it for the notification system.
Okay, thank you, Fred.
Great, thank you. So in terms of ad hoc subcommittee discussion of proposals, the ATC ad hoc took on this topic briefly just to think through kind of higher level what proposals were being included for the next fiscal year. And then the ad hoc subcommittee also discussed some kind of methodology to prioritize projects for that 20% funding. And I'd like to just go through what we discussed, and we'll be asking for your feedback as well. So recommendations for prioritization of projects and access to that 20% priority funding. Some of the considerations that we were thinking would be maybe the highest priority would be new and emerging projects that need some additional funding. But at the same time, there are a lot of existing projects that are high priority, high cost, really needed. And so the ATC and Operations Committee has a lot of flexibility to think through where that funding should go. Priority projects, especially in zones with low revenue and high cost, such as the coastal zone areas in West Marin and also overlapping into Southern Marin, that might be a good area to put some 20% funding. Additionally, if there are projects that just need to increase the pace and scale of their efforts, that's something to consider. A few other items to consider in this discussion: how do these proposals fit into MWPA goals? How do they fit into the CWPP project list, the high priority project list, fire hazard severity maps, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have a variety of different prioritization kind of science-based efforts that might inform this kind of thinking going forward. And that includes the evacuation ingress egress study, the wildfire risk perception survey that has to do with public info, and our risk assessment, both on parcel and the shaded fuel break that I mentioned earlier. So those are all in draft form currently, but in future years, I think that can really help guide that discussion as well. And then of course, we have a lot of expertise in the room and knowledge in terms of where dollars should go for the biggest benefit. So those are all considerations that this group can take into account. We've covered a lot of material. Most of the proposals, just a reminder, most of the proposals are repeats of things you've seen before and funded before. There are a few new proposals here and there scattered throughout. Today, what we might want to do is take a moment to discuss kind of approach and methodology around that 20% priority funding. Some of the projects that we know currently are seeking additional funds, additional support this next fiscal year. We can have that discussion today. We don't have to make decisions. We also have ad hoc subcommittee meetings coming up. We might want to spend some time digging into some of the project proposals and asking questions of the project proponents. And as a reminder, the ad hoc subcommittee will meet a couple of times in April to discuss, and we'll have some time to dig into this. ATC will be meeting, ATC ad hoc will be meeting. So we'll have a lot of discussions yet to come. And then the operations committee will meet again May 3rd, and that's really when we should be making our decision and moving things along to the board for consideration on May 18th. So that's a lot of information, but we got through all of that material in an hour, which is pretty good. So we do have some time for discussion, Q&A. I'm happy to bring up past slides if you'd like to see them again, and happy to make all of this material public and available for future consideration.
Through the chair.
Question from Krista, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. In regard to the last slide, is there somebody on the call here, or Anne, can you describe what is the $300,000 project from the Central Marin that's seeking priority funding? I don't know.
Sure, that was supplemental funding for the inspection program. So I think that's just in addition to the funding that they're seeking through the Defensible Space Fund. They're looking for an additional $300,000. I don't know the details about why the additional $300,000 is needed. So anybody else who can speak to that, feel free to, but that's what has been submitted.
I can speak to it, Ann.
Perfect, thank you.
So historically, or over the last couple of years, we've utilized core funding in amounts lower than the $300,000 to start the offset of the deliverance of our 15 to 17,000 inspections throughout the Central Zone and Marin County. As our program has continued to grow and as costs increase for overhead and for employees, we're looking to up that to $300,000 to cover some of the costs of our program. The rest of the program is paid for by individual agencies within all the zones that are supported by our program to cover either through local or DSpace money to cover the rest of the costs of that program. So currently, and we've heard it in today's meeting, talked about being the county program or other DSpace programs. It is the program. It's our Central and West and Southern Marin groups that have represented 14 departments have all been collaborative in building this program, and will do the same this year to accomplish those 15 to 17,000 inspections throughout all those jurisdictions. That $300,000 is meant to support some of that overhead feature and all the roll-up costs that go into providing a program that completes that many inspections throughout a good part of the county. Any questions from the group?
Larry, what's the official name for this program? I know it's a mouthful. It would be helpful to define it.
Yeah, we've landed on the Marin Defensible Space Alliance. We didn't want something that represented a single zone or a single agency, but best fitted the collaborative nature of this program and allowed all of us to work jointly together, pulling that rope in the same direction to accomplish those goals.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
And report.
Follow-up question, Larry. Thank you so much. So it's a program for the county, for many places in the county, but yet it's in the Central Marin category. Is that correct?
This will be year 5 of our program. It started when we took programs we had here in Kentfield County Marin, Central Marin, who are all doing individual inspection type programs through different resources. We combine those together because we shared borders. And this was kind of, as the MWPA kind of got its legs, we use it as a way to stand up a collaborative approach to providing evaluations throughout our jurisdiction. And originally that started off as Central Marin, Kentfield, the Ross Valley agencies, with support from Marin County Fire to get all the way out to the west communities. Over time, as that model has developed and grown, I think it became available to other jurisdictions that shared kind of the same philosophy and methodology in making those evaluations happen. And we had long talks with Southern Marin and Mill Valley to bring them along to kind of share that model. As we all continue to develop and use Fireside as our platform to gather the evaluation information, as our messaging continues to stay the same throughout the county, it was important that we kind of open up our program to include as many agencies as possible that want to share in that vision and that opportunity to deliver those evaluations throughout our blurred borders in Central and Southern Marin and West Marin.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on Ann's report or anything on the 23-24 work plan draft proposal from members of the committee? Hearing none, let's open up the floor. Or Ann, are you good to move on? Okay, let's open up the floor to public comment.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item or any of the information just received, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. And sir, oh, it looks like we do have a comment from Rebecca Suggs. And just to remind the public, comments are limited to 3 minutes in duration. Rebecca, you should be able to deliver your comment at this time.
And just a quick question for Ann, will the slides be available?
Yes, I can make the slides available and we can attach them to the agenda. So you'll be able to find them if you seek out the agenda to this meeting.
That'd be great. Thanks.
And if there are any additional members of the public wishing to speak regarding with the information just received, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining by phone. And so there are no additional hands.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 8 action items. I don't believe there are any. Nope. Moving on to number 9 committee reports. Do we have a report from the Citizens Oversight Committee?
The Citizens Oversight Committee notified me this morning that they have no items to report and no questions for the committee.
And same for the ATC.
Correct. I think you've heard quite a bit about the ATC actions.
Wonderful. Since there are no reports, we won't open the floor to public comment on that. We'll move to number 9 committee members' requests regarding future agenda items. Any community members' requests for agenda items? Hearing none, we'll move to item 10, adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second.
First by Chief Tubbs, second by Krista. Thank you guys so much. Have a good day.
Ann and Mark, can you hold on just for a sidebar?
Thank
Happy
you.
to.
Absolutely.